Okay, so imagine a sound. It's born in the American Rust Belt, Detroit, specifically in the mid-'80s. It's rhythmic, it's got this kind of deep, futuristic soul. But here's the thing. In its own hometown, it's a struggle. It's for the underground, for small clubs.
It was a local secret, really. A
Yeah.
vision of the future that, hadn't quite landed for a mass audience yet.
Exactly. But then, that sound, it crosses the Atlantic, and when it gets to Europe, something just wild happens. It doesn't just get popular, it explodes. It starts toppling cultural barriers, it takes over abandoned bank vaults, it fills fields in England with illegal
And it
parties.
scares the British government so much they literally write a law to try and ban a specific type of rhythm.
It's an incredible story.
It really is. It's one of the most fascinating examples of cultural export.
Yeah.
You hear about rock and roll being an American thing that the British perfected and sold back. Well, this is a very similar story for techno.
Born in the US, but it found its spiritual home in Europe?
Spiritual home and its massive industrial scale.
Absolutely. And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. We've got a fantastic piece of source material to work with, a transcript from a documentary. It's called Masters of the Mix, the Techno Story Episode 2, European Explosion.
And this document, it's like a travelogue for a sound wave. It traces how that Detroit blueprint moved to the UK, Germany, Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
But the key thing here, and this is what's so interesting, is not just that the music traveled. It's that the environment in each of those places, the politics, the architecture, it radically mutated the music.
So it's like the music was a virus, and every city it hit produced a different variant.
That is the perfect analogy.
Mhm.
The DNA is the same, but the expression changes completely depending on where it lands.
Okay, so our mission today is to trace that mutation. We're going from sweaty illegal parties to 1.5 million people dancing in Berlin, but we have to start at the beginning. How did this sound even get to Europe in the first place?
It started with the DJs themselves. Late 80s, the Detroit pioneers, we're talking legends like Carl Craig, Derek May, Kevin Saunderson, they started touring the UK.
And the UK was ready for it, right? Acid House was already happening.
Oh, yeah. The second summer of love. British kids were already primed for electronic, repetitive dance music. They were hungry for something new.
Really?
So when these Detroit guys showed up, they weren't walking into a cold room.
They were walking into a powder keg.
Exactly.
In the source material, it points to one track in particular, the one that lit the fuse, Strings of Life.
Yes. If there's a Year Zero anthem for this whole thing, it's probably Strings of Life by Rhythm is Rhythm,
Which is Derek May.
an alias of Derek May, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just frantic. It has this manic but totally euphoric piano line. It doesn't sound like a pop song. To British ears in 1987, it sounded like the future arriving all at once. The documentary notes this track alone converted thousands of people.
So the British kids hear this, their minds are blown, and of course they want to start making it themselves. But this is where that mutation idea kicks in. They didn't just copy it.
No, they adapted it. The UK producers, they took that Detroit soul and that funk, and they kind of stripped some of it away.
They took the soul out.
Well, they replaced the soul with adrenaline. The UK sound became known as hard techno or rave techno. It was harder, faster, more aggressive. It was designed for huge, dirty sound systems in muddy fields.
The source mentions a few names here, Carl Cox, Dave Angel, and a track called Energy Flash by Joey Beltram.
Energy Flash is the perfect example. It's dark, it's relentless, it's music for stomping, not for gliding. And that brings us to the setting. The music had to change because the venue changed completely.
Right, we're not in slick city clubs anymore. We're in the M25 orbital rave scene.
Exactly. The M25 is that massive highway circling London. Promoters would break into fields, warehouses, abandoned sites, all along that route.
And this was all illegal.
Completely illegal.
Yeah.
Thousands of people gathering in secret. You'd have to call a number from a phone booth, get directions to a meeting point, follow a convoy of cars. The scale was massive. And because it was unauthorized, it felt like a movement.
And whenever young people gather in fields to listen to loud music, the government tends to get a little nervous. But the response from the British government was, it sounds like something out of a satire.
It really does. The documentary highlights the Criminal Justice Act of 1994. The government wanted to shut these raves down, but they had to legally define what they were banning.
So how do you ban a party?
You ban the music. In the actual text of the law, they define these gatherings as events playing music characterized by, and this is a direct quote, a succession of repetitive beats.
I still can't believe that's real. They tried to legislate against rhythm, repetitive beats. Isn't that just music?
Technically, yes. But it just shows the panic. They thought the sound wasn't music. It was a mechanical noise disrupting society. They thought if they banned the beat, they could kill the culture.
Did it work?
It was the backfire of the century. By trying to ban it, they gave the whole scene a common enemy. It wasn't just a party anymore. It was an act of civil disobedience. Dancing became a political act.
So while the UK is literally fighting for its right to party, something even bigger is happening in Germany. The source shifts us to Berlin, and the timing? It's just perfect.
It is historic. November 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall. You cannot separate Berlin techno from the fall of the wall. They are twinned events.
Okay, unpack that for us. Why does a political event lead to a music boom?
It's all about space and a vacuum of power. When the wall fell, the city was in chaos. In East Berlin, you suddenly had hundreds of abandoned buildings. The old regime was gone. The new rules hadn't been written yet.
A no man's land.
Precisely. Old power plants, bunkers, department stores, just sitting empty.
Yeah.
And for a short time, there were no regulations, no licenses, no fire codes, no closing times. It was a playground.
The source mentions a club called Tresor, which opened in '91. The name means vault, right?
Because it was in an actual vault. The vault of an old department store. Imagine that. Concrete walls, rusted safety deposit boxes, steel bars. It was raw industrial decay.
And that space must have shaped the sound.
Completely. You can't play happy disco in a concrete dungeon. The music had to be hard, metallic, echoing. The reverb of the concrete became an instrument itself.
And this is where Detroit comes back into the picture. The doc calls it a mutual love affair between Detroit and Berlin.
That's a key point. Detroit DJs like Jeff Mills and Blake Baxter, they found that while they were respected in the U.S., in Berlin, they were treated like gods. The music was seen as high art, not just party fuel.
High art.
Yes. It was the soundtrack to unification. Kids from the East and West meeting for the first time on these dance floors. The music was the glue. It was serious.
And we have to mention Berghain. The source calls it legendary.
Berghain is the spiritual successor to those early clubs. It's famous for two things. Its insane door policy. You can queue for hours and just get turned away. And its marathon DJ sets.
How long is a marathon set?
We're talking 10, 12 hours sometimes. The club opens Saturday night and doesn't close until Monday morning. It's treated almost like a temple to the music.
But it wasn't all dark and exclusive. The source gives us this just staggering statistic about the love parade.
Right, this is the flip side. It started in 1989 as a tiny political demonstration. 150 people marching for peace and understanding through music.
And it grew just a little.
Just a bit. By the late 90s, it was up to 1.5 million people.
That's the size of a major city.
Yeah.
All in the street, dancing to techno. It's mind-boggling.
It shows how the music went from a subterranean secret to the dominant youth culture in Germany.
So UK has its raves, Berlin has its vaults. But the source material points out that other cities were taking the sound in totally different directions. Let's talk Frankfurt and Belgium.
This is where you really see the genre speciate. If Berlin was dark and minimal, Frankfurt went the other way. They developed trance.
Trance, even people who don't know the genre, they know the vibe. Big melodies, hands in the air.
That's it. Producers like Sven Väth and Jam and Spoon. They took the techno rhythm, but they layered emotion right on top. Soaring synths, euphoric buildups, and those huge breakdowns where the beat just drops out.
The source calls it techno with emotion on the surface.
A perfect description.
Yeah.
And it traveled so well, trance became a global phenomenon. It's like the stadium rock version of techno.
But then you have Belgium. They did not go for the stadium rock vibe.
No. Belgium is fascinating. Around 1987, they developed a sound called new beat.
And what's new beat?
The key thing is that it was slow, really slow, like 100, 110 beats per minute. It was heavy, industrial, almost menacing.
But then it mutated.
Snapped back like a rubber band. It went from being the slowest dance music to being the fastest. The scene evolved into hardcore and then gabber. By the early 90s, they were pushing 180 beats per minute.
180 BPM. That's not dancing, that's a medical event.
It was called terror music, pure aggression, distorted kick drums. It just shows how malleable that Detroit blueprint was. Europe was treating it like open source code.
So while Europe is busy turning techno into all these different subgenres, what's happening back in Detroit? Are they just watching this from afar?
Not at all. This is what's known as the second wave. While Europe was expanding the sound outwards, Detroit was refining it inwards. You have innovators like Carl Craig.
He brought in jazz influences.
Yeah, sophistication. Tracks like Sandstorms, they're not just loops, they're compositions. They have complex chords, shifting textures. He showed that techno could be intellectual.
And then there's Jeff Mills again, the technical wizard.
The virtuoso. He left underground resistance and became famous for mixing on 3 decks at once.
Most DJs use two.
Right. He was using 3, sometimes 4, just throwing records on and off. He turned DJing into a performance art, a high-wire act.
And you mentioned underground resistance. That name sounds pretty political.
It was Mad Mike Banks and Jeff Mills. They took a militant stance. They wore combat masks, refused interviews. They saw the music as a form of revolution.
What were they resisting?
The commercialization of their culture. They were reminding the world that this wasn't just party music for European raves. It was black music from Detroit with a message of struggle.
It's a powerful point. Now, the source material also mentions how techno eventually broke out of that US-Europe axis. Japan, Brazil, South Africa. Why did this genre travel so well?
The doc offers a really simple, compelling reason. The lack of vocals.
Makes sense. No language barrier.
Exactly. You don't need to speak English to understand a kick drum. With hip-hop, you need to understand the lyrics. With techno, the emotion is all in the rhythm and the sound itself. A kid in Tokyo and a kid in Sao Paulo can feel the exact same thing from the same track. It's a universal language.
And we can't talk about this era without talking about the gear, the machines. Let's start with the Roland TR-909.
The 909 is the heartbeat of the 90s. The 80s were about the TR-808, that deep, boomy sound. But the 909 was crisper. It had a punchy kick that could cut through a massive sound system.
Built for the warehouse.
Totally. If you hear a thumping 90s techno track, you're almost certainly hearing a 909. And then you had the TB-303, the little silver box that made that squelchy acid sound. These are the tools.
But then the script flips. We move from hardware to software.
The digital revolution.
Yeah.
Late 90s. Suddenly you have tools like Rebirth, Fruity Loops, Tractor, and this changed everything.
How so?
It democratized it. Before, you needed thousands of dollars for the gear. Suddenly, any kid with a PC could make a professional-sounding track in their bedroom.
But the source says there was a trade-off.
There always is.
Yeah.
The purists miss the rawness of the hardware. Machines have happy accidents, glitches. Software can be a little too perfect, too clean.
Yeah.
But it also meant an absolute explosion of content.
Which brings us to the so what of this whole journey. We've gone from Detroit's ruins to UK fields, Berlin vaults, and finally to the software on a laptop.
It's a story of adaptation. The most surprising thing for me isn't just one fact. It's that this single musical idea, this machine soul, was robust enough to hold all these different meanings.
It's a container.
Yes, it could be political protest, high art, a psychedelic trip, a militant statement, all at the same time.
And despite all the changes in technology, the documentary concludes that the core vibe was still the central rule.
That's it. Analog or digital, 120 BPM or 180, the goal is the same. To lose yourself in the repetition. Create a collective state of transcendence.
So here's a thought to leave you with. We talked about that shift to software, right? The democratization of art. When everyone can be a producer with no need for a studio or a label, does that sheer volume of content dilute the art form?
It definitely creates a lot of noise to sift through.
Does it make it harder to find the signal?
Yeah.
Or does it mean that the next musical revolution, the next Detroit, the next Berlin won't come from a major city at all? Could it come from a teenager's bedroom in a place we've never even heard of?
That is the big question. When the barrier to entry is zero, creativity is the only thing left that matters. And honestly, I think that's a pretty exciting place to be.
Something to think about. That's it for this deep dive into the European explosion of techno.
Thanks for listening.
See you on the next one.